This webinar is about pdfA in general. The intention is to give an introduction of what pdfA is, and I will be using pdfaPilot from Callas software to demonstrate some of the points I will make about pdfA. I will try to keep it relatively short, somewhere between half an hour to 45 minutes. Don't hesitate to ask questions. I'll be very happy to go into more detail if there are detailed questions about any of this. So the problem that we're talking about is the problem of preserving information, and it used to be much easier in a way than it is today, because messages, texts were either written in stone, literally, or written on manuscripts, on paper. And all of these materials have their own specific problems if you try to archive them. But at least the information on a piece of paper doesn't just change, and you can read the same paper 100 or 200 years from now. You could think that this would actually become easier if the information is available in an electronic format, but I always use the same example. I studied physics at some point in my life, and I actually wrote a thesis about that in 1994. That's hardly 19 years ago. But if you look at the technology that we used 20 years ago, if you look at the applications that were used and the file formats that were used, then that information that I stored 19 years ago today would be very, very difficult to retrieve. I don't have the necessary equipment anymore to read the disks that I saved this on. The applications don't exist anymore, or the format in which the applications store their documents has changed so much that these documents that I have can no longer be read by today's applications. So even though much of the information we're typically dealing with has migrated into an electronic form and is now available as electronic documents, that doesn't mean that it's easier to archive that information. You're not necessarily certain that those files that you save today will actually be accessible 20 years or 30 years from now. So if we're talking about how long do you want to preserve information, the first question is typically, how long is that? How long is long enough? And it depends very much on what these documents are intended for. For many businesses in Belgium, we have to save tax documents for 5 years, anything that has to do with added value tax for 7 years. If you're talking about medical records for employees, it's 15 years, but that's actually pretty short if you're talking about document archival. If you're an engineer and you build something, you want the designs of what you build, the mechanical drawings of what you build to be available for as long as the building itself. If you build a bridge, then the structural design documents should last as long as the actual bridge. And if you talk to people who work for certain areas in the government or for libraries, when they talk about preservation of information, they talk about storing it now and then keeping it forever. So the period of time that we're talking about can actually be very, very long. Now, a couple of years ago, around 1993, Adobe came up with a file format called PDF, a portable document format, which is now used for all kinds of things in all kinds of different markets. And for quite a while, PDF was assumed to be the solution for many things, ranging from graphic arts to document archival. Unfortunately, there are many good things about PDF, but there are also some drawbacks. The good things about it is that it is an electronic documentation format that was designed to be exchangeable between different systems and different platforms. So the goal, the design goal from the very beginning was that if I created something and it looked a certain way on a PC, then it should look the same way on a Mac or on a Linux machine. And that's very important. It focuses on exact visual representation much more than on the structure in the actual document. It's not only platform independent, but it's also printer independent. And it's a very compact and a complete file format. Compact meaning that it's relatively small for the information that it contains. It, for example, has the capability of using all kinds of different compression algorithms, and complete because it can store all the information you need to be able to draw that document or to render that document correctly. If the document uses a certain font, then that font can be embedded in the document. If images are used, they are embedded in the document. It's also, and that is a little bit of a technical term, but it's a random access document, meaning that if I have a document that contains 1 million pages, it is just as quick to get to page number 2 as it is to get to page number 933,000. All of those are very important, and all of those mean that PDF is actually a good solution for an electronic archival format. On top of that, and that's even better, it's a standardized format. PDF was invented by Adobe, and Adobe for a very long time made it publicly available, but kept the copyright. Now, what Adobe has done a couple of years ago is transfer the ownership of the PDF standard to the ISO committee. It's known now as ISO 32,000, and the future versions of PDF are no longer developed by Adobe, so the ownership no longer is with a vendor, but future versions are developed by a committee within the ISO standards organization. And that means that not only is it platform and printer independent, it's now also vendor independent, which for a long-term archival standard is critically important. Unfortunately, PDF by itself is not the solution that you might think it is. PDF is a very broad format. You can do all kinds of different things with it. I can store video in there, I can store images in there, I can store 4 or 5 different font types in it. There are 6, 7, or 8 different compression algorithms that can be used. So it's a very widely used format for many different applications. And with that come a number of things that are not very well defined. If I have a PDF file, I still have no guarantee that that PDF file will be readable 50 years from now. There are too many things that might be going wrong with that PDF. The problem is made worse to a certain extent because some of the PDF readers, and the most well-known still is Adobe Reader or Adobe Acrobat, that some of these readers are very easy. They will read and display all kinds of PDF files that don't exactly follow the specification. But of course, there is no guarantee that these readers will not change over the next 50 years, and that what is still allowed or readable today, even though it doesn't follow the spec exactly, that those things will still be readable 50 years from now. So there is room for interpretation in PDF files, and that's never a good thing when you talk about long-term archival. You want things to be defined very clearly and very accurately. So the solution that, again, the ISO standards organization came up with is to develop a subset of the PDF standard. And that subset is called ISO pdfA. It's an ISO standard that defines which features of PDF you are allowed to use in a pdfA file. And the whole design of pdfA was to make sure that you can't use anything where there is room for interpretation. So all of these things that over the years might no longer be supported or might cause different readers to display a PDF file differently on different systems, all those kinds of things were forbidden to be used in a pdfA file. PDFA itself is also developed and maintained by the ISO standards organization. There is a subcommittee of the ISO that comes up with these standards, that writes the text for these standards. And the stated goal of that committee is to develop a standard that will allow you to create a PDFA file today and still be readable 50 years from now. So the goal they set is to be able to preserve information for at least 50 years. And very exceptionally for an ISO standard, the PDFA standard is set to never expire. Most ISO standards have an expiration date. What the ISO committees decide is that when they create a standard today, the assumption is that things will change over the years, so a standard has to be adjusted or will automatically expire after a certain time period. The PDFA standards are the only ISO standards that don't have such an expiration date. So if you create a file today that follows the PDFA standard, then that standard will remain the same for as long as it exists. That also means that when new technologies appear, when the PDFA standard would need to be adjusted, that basically new versions of that standard will be developed, but that the original pdfaPilot standard will never be changed by itself. I'll talk more about different versions of the standard in a little while. Now, we could have developed one pdfaPilot standard, and that would have been easy for everyone. Unfortunately, different workflows have different requirements, and pdfaPilot, the first version of this pdfaPilot standard, already came in two different flavors. A 1B, and it's a little bit counterintuitive when you look at the naming. That's something you have to get used to. pdfaPilot 1B can be thought to come from basic. It's the basic flavor. This is a flavor that guarantees visual reproduction. So this means if I create a pdfaPilot 1B file today, that 50 years from now, software that is compliant with pdfaPilot is going to be able to take that file and to show it to me, and it will look exactly the same as what I have on screen today. That's visual reproduction. It doesn't say anything about the content or the meaning of the content in that document. It just talks about visual representation. That's actually exactly the same as what you get with paper today. If I print something and I preserve the paper for the next 50 years, then it will still look the same 50 years from now. On top of that, there was a pdfaPilot 1A flavor developed as well. And the A comes either from accessible or advanced, whatever is easiest for you to remember. A pdfaPilot 1A file incorporates all of the requirements and restrictions of the 1B flavor. So an advanced pdfaPilot file is always compatible with the basic flavor of pdfaPilot. But on top of that, it also focuses on the meaning of the document content. And it's easier to show, actually, than to try and explain it theoretically. If you look at this slide that I have on here, there is an example piece of paper, and that paper has it has a title, which happens to be Paris, but in Dutch. It has some text on it, some paragraphs of text, and then it has an image of the Eiffel Tower on it. A pdfaPilot 1B file will preserve this information. And 50 years from now, you'll be able to print exactly this same visual representation of the document. If we go to pdfaPilot 1A, then we also have to remember information about the meaning of the document. And what does that entail? Well, for starters, I have to document what the structure of the text and the document itself is. So the title that you have there has to be tagged as a document title. each of the paragraphs has to be tagged to state that this is a paragraph in the text. So all of the structure that I have in that document needs to be documented in the file itself. And that is, of course, important when you start talking about not only printing that document 50 years from now, but being able to automatically extract information out of it or convert it from PDF into XML or any of those things. So the first thing that gets added when you start talking about a 1A file is that structure information. The second thing that gets added is that you need to tag, and again, this is meaning, you need to tag all of the images in the file. It's not sufficient to have an image in the file. You need to have descriptive text for that image. And this is a very good example in the sense that, yes, you see a picture of the Eiffel Tower on there, but actually this picture comes from Wikipedia, and it's a very specific moment when the Eiffel Tower is depicted on there. It's just after the liberation after World War II, and that is probably content that you want to save in the file, or 50 years from now it might be very difficult to understand when exactly that picture was taken and what the meaning was. So again, it's not about just being able to print that picture, it's knowing what that picture means. It's very important when you think about a workflow where you want to deal with pdfa that you understand very well what the difference between those two flavors is. Of course, the more information you store in a document, typically the better it is. If I have a library, it's nice to be able to search for pictures that are related to World War II and the Eiffel Tower, and this picture that we just had on screen would pop up as an example. So it's very nice to have that information available. And from that point of view, in many cases, people say, well, then we should store our documents as PDF A1A, because then we have as many capabilities as possible with our library. And that's true, but of course, the more information you need in a document, the more difficult it will be to automatically create that document. And you have to realize that while PDF A1B is relatively easy to make, a PDF A1A file is typically very, very difficult to make unless your source document already has all of that structure and meaning information in it. So if you have an InDesign document and that InDesign document is properly tagged and it has the right structure information in it, then yes, you can relatively easily create a PDF A1A file. And if you have those kinds of source documents, you should make a PDF A1A file. If you don't have that information in the original document, then either you're going to have to choose for PDF A1B, or there will be a lot of human intervention, just work that a person needs to do to put all of that extra information in those PDFA files. And in many cases, that's prohibitive in a workflow situation. So realize that there is a very big balance between usability and complexity in between those two files. Okay, so let me quit the presentation for just a second, and what I'm going to do instead is launch callas pdfaPilot, which is the application that callas software creates to validate files against the pdfa standard and to also convert them to pdfa if that is what you need to do in a workflow. And there are a couple of different versions of pdfaPilot. I'm using the standalone desktop version, so I can just drag a file on top of that, and it displays how the PDF file looks. It already shows me how many pages I have here at the bottom and what the page size is, and so on. Before I go any further in this, pdfaPilot is one of the two product lines that callas software has. There are actually two. You have pdfaPilot that is designed for the archival mark it if you want. And then you have PDF Toolbox for those people that are dealing more with graphic arts and so on. The technology in those two product lines is virtually the same. What is different is some of the user interface, which in the case of pdfaPilot is more geared towards working with PDFA documents and archival, a little bit more focus on metadata and so on. And in the case of PDF Toolbox, of course, is more focused on pre-press functionality and cleaning up documents to be usable for print. But we're working with pdfaPilot, and you can see a switchboard interface here. That's this iPhone-ish user interface. And that contains buttons that symbolize a group of functionalities I have for this document. So I could click on PDFA, and I see a number of things I can do with a PDFA or with a PDF to create PDFA and so on. I'm actually not going to use the switchboard right now, so I'm going to close that. Instead, I want the PDFA in one click window. This is a window that is specifically designed to either check whether a file is PDFA compatible or to try and convert it to PDFA. And I have this configuration button here that lets me choose which of these flavors I want. And you can see both of the flavors that I already discussed, PDFA 1B and PDFA 1A. You can see both of those in this list, and then a whole bunch of other flavors that we'll talk about shortly. But let's start with the easy stuff, and we'll go to PDFA 1B, what I called the basic flavor, the most easy flavor to create. If I check that file, this is a document that comes from the internet, and if I check that file, not unexpectedly, it tells me that there is a whole bunch of problems with this particular document. Most documents that you generate, that you find today being generated by all kinds of different workflows, most documents will not be PDFA compliant. However, in many cases, it is actually easy to convert them. So if I, instead of checking ask pdfaPilot to convert to PDFA, then I can choose where to save that, and I'll save it on my desktop, call that 1B. And then pdfaPilot will try to convert that document. Now, it gives me a nice badge with a green check mark. If you look at the bottom of the file, it also adds a green pdfa1b tag in there. So it was successful to convert this document into a pdfa1b file. That's how easy it can be. And for many documents that you'll find, and in many workflows that you probably come in contact with, conversion to pdfa1b is relatively easy. And that is exactly because the format focuses on visual representation and not on meaning or structure. It's only how the document looks. And because PDF was designed from the start to be a reliable, it's a document description format, so it was designed to be very reliable in how it represents all kinds of different graphic elements. This conversion is typically a very easy one. Okay, so I've created a pdfa1b file. That's nice. Let me close that and open up the original document again. And what we'll do now is make it a little bit more difficult for us and then switch to pdfa1a, the accessible or advanced flavor. So I've switched to that. I now have the button that says convert to pdfa1a. And if I click that, it again asks me to save. So I'll save it with a 1a suffix. And pdfaPilot tries the same conversion. Takes a second, and then in this case, it doesn't come up with a nice green check mark. Instead, it complains. And what does it complain about? It complains about missing structure information. This document doesn't contain any images, so I don't get any error messages about tags being missing for images, but I do still expect the document to be structured. I would want to be or expect to have this title, for example, tagged as being a title, and this should be tagged as a table with tagging of where the columns are and where the different rows are and so on. That information was not in a PDF file, and it's not something that pdfaPilot can easily add in an automated fashion. In fact, there is no software that 100% reliably can convert any document into PDF-A1A file because of this lack of structure information and lack of tagging information. So in this case, I failed to convert it, and it very nicely makes the point that I had before. If you have a workflow and you're deciding between which formats of the standard that you want to be using, very carefully consider whether it needs to be 1B or 1A, and whether it's possible for you to either have the correct source information to do this conversion to PDF-1A, or whether you want to go through the additional cost to enter that information or add that structural information into the documents that you're saving in your database. Okay, so I'm going to close this down again and go back to my presentation for a second again. So, like I said in the beginning, a PDF-A as a standard never expires. It doesn't have any expiration date, and that means that PDF-A 1A and 1B, as they are defined, will never expire. They will always remain valid standards. That also means that if you have a lot of documents that you've converted into PDF-A 1B, for example, that there is no need to update those at a given point in time. They can continue to exist as PDF A1B files. But of course, technology has changed since the inception of PDF-A, and it's necessary to evolve the standard together with the changes in technology. And at a certain point, ISO came up with a new, what they technically call a new part of the PDF-A standard called pdfaA2. And pdfaA2 allows all of the more modern PDF features to be used. A pdfaA1 file cannot contain live transparency, it cannot contain optional content, it's not allowed to use JPEG 2000 compression, and so on. So a lot of the more recent, or advanced PDF functionalities or features cannot be used in a PDF-A1 file. And PDF-A2 was designed to overcome those limitations. That's very nice in some cases because, for example, the use of JPEG 2000 allows me to store documents that are much smaller but still have a higher quality of images in them. And if I decide to store the documents in my library as PDF-A2 files, then I'm able to use this JPEG 2000 compression. PDF-A2 not only focuses on these modern PDF features, but it also adds a number of other things. It allows you, for example, to embed other PDF-A files. And that sounds very theoretical, but it's actually quite nice. Imagine that I receive an email and I want to archive that email. If it's only the email without attachments, then there really isn't a big problem. I convert that email into a PDF-A file and I store it in my archive. The question is, what happens if that email contains, for example, a Word document as an attachment or an Excel spreadsheet? How do I store that? Of course, I could convert the email into a PDF-A file. I can convert a Word or the Excel file in a PDF-A file, and then somehow keep track of those two items in my document management system. In PDF-A2, I get an additional option. I can do that same conversion. I take the email and convert it into PDF-A. Then I look at the attachments that came with that email, and I convert all of those to PDF-A files. And then if I use PDF-A2, I can take those attachments, those PDFA files that I created from those attachments, and store those in the PDFA file representing the actual email. And now I have one PDFA file that contains embedded documents, but only one file. And I only have one file to store in my document management system. I don't have to keep track of any other pieces because they're all embedded inside of that PDF file. So a pdfaA2 file, in a way, can be used in the same way as you would use a zip archive to send a whole bunch of documents at the same time. And this is not something, this functionality of embedding documents is not something that was invented by the ISO for use in pdfaA2. This is standard PDF technology. And if you have an application such as Adobe Acrobat, then it will be able to show you which files were embedded inside of a PDF file if you open it. So this is standard PDF technology that was used by the ISO committee to allow this embedding. What is very important, in pdfaA2, there is still a restriction that everything needs to be compliant to PDFA. So the original document needs to be a PDFA file, but everything that I store inside of that PDFA file also needs to be a valid PDFA file. So I'm still assured that when I look at this archive 50 years from now, I'll be able to see the email, I'll be able to see all of the embedded attachments that I have in there. What pdfaA2 also did was something that was very, very important for workflows. And that was the invention of a new flavor. And of course, because they already had A and B, they invented a flavor called U, which seems kind of random, but the U stands for Unicode. So there is a good reason to call it that. And in many ways, the U flavor, the Unicode flavor, is somewhere in between A and B. B was very easy to make. A had all this other structure and meaning information. But in many archives, what you want to be able to do is you don't need all of that structure and all of the tagging of images necessarily. What you need to be able to do is search those files. And you need to be able to, for example, copy and paste text information out of those files. Now, if you have a pdfaA1A file, you can do that. It not only stores structure and meaning, it also makes sure that the text is actually embedded in a good way so that it can be copy-pasted. But creating these pdfaA1A files was very difficult because of what I explained. It's hard to invent structure and the meaning for all of the images. The Unicode flavor overcomes that. The Unicode flavor says that all of the fonts need to be correctly encoded in the document to allow copy and paste and search, but you don't have to store the actual structure or tagging information in the file. So we now, in pdfaA2, we have 3 different flavors. You start with the basic one that is very, very easy and only focuses on visual representation, and you might not be able to search it correctly. You might not be able to copy and paste or extract the text. Then the second flavor is the Unicode flavor, where you are certain that you'll be able to copy and paste or extract the text. And then you still have the advanced flavor, where you have all of the information about structure and tagging and meaning in the file. And again, in a workflow, you have to decide which the right flavor is that you want to use. If you have a workflow and you're trying to decide whether you're going to store documents as pdfaA1 or pdfaA2, in most cases it makes sense to use pdfaA2. And that is mainly because the fact that things like transparency are allowed, JPEG 2000 is allowed, and that's very important if you have modern documents that you want to store. In most cases, or in many cases, it's much easier and you'll be able to get a higher quality file if you do the conversion to pdfaA2B instead than pdfaA1B. So if you have old archives where you already have pdfaA1 files, you can leave them alone. Those are absolutely fine, and that standard will never expire, so that's good. But if you have a choice for new documents, PDF A2 is definitely the better way to go. Now, it could stop with PDF A2, but it actually doesn't. In the meantime, there is already a PDF A3 flavor or version of the PDF A standard. And the intention of PDF A3, there is only one big change with PDF A2. And that change is that the files that you embed inside a PDF A3 file don't necessarily need to be PDF A themselves. And this sounds very, very weird, but there is actually a good reason and all kinds of useful use cases for that. What does that mean? It means that, again, with the example of the email, I can receive an email, and that email has a number of attachments. Let's say that it has an Excel spreadsheet attached. Well, in a PDF A3 workflow, I can convert the email to PDF A3. That's still something I need to do. So that email will be a valid PDF A3 file. And then I will convert the spreadsheet also into a PDF A file. But this time I can embed both the PDF A version of the spreadsheet and the original spreadsheet itself. Both of those get inserted into that email PDF A3 file. So now I have a PDF A3 file that is suitable for long-term archival, and inside of that I have a PDF version of the spreadsheet, which I'm assured I'll be able to read 30 years from now, because it is PDF A as well. I've converted it, but I also have the original spreadsheet. And if I look at this email 10 years from now, I can try to extract that Excel file and open that Excel file in Microsoft Excel again. And that might work or it might not work. Perhaps the technology has evolved too quickly and I can't open it anymore, or it doesn't look the same anymore. If that is the case, then I still had that PDF A version of the spreadsheet and I can work with that. But if Excel is still able to open my spreadsheet, then I have access to the original document as it was intended. So it's a way to archive information with the aim of preserving it as long as possible, but at the same time making the original information available for as long as possible as well. And if that is usable, fine. If it's not usable, then I find another way to deal with that. Another example that is that has been implemented in Germany is a way to create invoices. A way to create invoices as a PDF file, as a PDF A file, so that the invoices can be archived, but inside of that PDF file have an XML representation of that same invoice data. And the idea behind this is the same. If I have to print an invoice 50 years from now, I'll be able to do so because I have it as a PDF A file. But the XML data is still inside as well. So if at some point I need to go back to my archive and even automatically extract all of that original XML information, I still have it available in a standardized way inside of those archived invoices as well. So in a way, it's a way of having the best of both worlds, of having something that is reliable to archive, but doesn't perhaps offer you all of the flexibility, and at the same time having the original information if and when I can still use it in my workflow. Now, before I end this, what I want to do is go back to pdfaPilot for a second. And I'm actually going to show you another feature of pdfaPilot. So I'm going to go back to that switchboard now, which was the iPhone-ish user interface that has all of these functions. You can already see a button here for embedded files, but I'm going to go to PDFA and I'm going to go to Office to PDFA in this case. Converting Office files into PDFA is a very common thing to do in most of these workflows. Now, if I tell pdfaPilot that I want to convert a file, and actually let's go back to my presentation and quit that for a second. And now in pdfaPilot, I'm going to take exactly that presentation, so that PowerPoint file, and I'm going to tell pdfaPilot that I want to convert that PowerPoint file. Now, again, I have a way to specify which level of PDFA I want to use. And if I select PDFA 1B, which we used previously, or if I select PDFA 2B, the more modern standard, you can see that this checkbox that I have at the bottom here that says embed source file, which means in our case, embed the original PowerPoint file, is not enabled. If I go to PDFA 3, it will now allow me to embed that source file into the PDFA that I create. So let's see what happens when I do that. pdfaPilot doesn't convert PowerPoint files or Excel files by itself. It uses the original application to do so. So basically what it does is it opens up PowerPoint, asks PowerPoint to convert that file into a PDF file, a good PDF file, and then creates a valid PDFA file out of that. And if I save that, so let's call that 3B, that's what we created. If I save that file, then you can see that I get a tag at the bottom here again that says pdfa3b, so that conversion was successful. And there is an additional panel that goes open where I can see that there is now a file embedded inside of that document. To show you that this is not specific to callas, let me actually open the same PDF file. It's only one PDF. We open that in Adobe Acrobat. And then you can see that it looks the same, which is very good because that's the purpose of PDFA. And if I go to the Attachments tab, you can see that I now have a PowerPoint file, that original PowerPoint file, embedded in there. And at any time, I could go in and save that file to disk again. So if I store this pdfaA3, this single pdfaA3 file in my archive or in my document archive system, then at any point I can take that file and extract the original version of the document. And again, that's a very nice way to preserve both a good archivable format, but also the original format. Because of course, there are features of these Office documents that you cannot work with or that don't mean anything in PDF. If I have an Excel sheet and I save that as a PDF file, in many ways I have the visual representation. I won't have access anymore to all the functions that are used and so on in the sheet. If I also store the original version of that Excel sheet in there, then I have the best of both worlds, and I can still extract that file and then work with that one. What you can also see, and that's a nice feature in Adobe Acrobat actually, is that if I open up a file that claims to be a PDFA file, it actually opens it up as read-only because it assumes that a PDFA file will be made for, or was made for archival, and you probably don't want to change that. So it already offers a first level of protection on there. Of course, nothing forbids you from enabling editing and still changing it afterwards, which probably breaks compatibility with PDFA, but Adobe Acrobat already recognizes this standard and offers to do the right thing out of the box, which is very nice. Okay, that was a very short overview of what the pdfaA standard means, what the different versions are in that pdfaA standard, and what those different versions mean in reality, and how with pdfaPilot you can start to work with these pdfaA documents or convert PDFs into a valid PDFA. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to type them in now, and I will attempt to still answer them on here. If you want, you can also send us an email or give us a call afterwards. the easiest way to do that is to use either the info@4ps.com email address or support@4ps.com email address, and that way we can get back to you and perhaps talk about specific questions you have for your workflow in person to person, which is always easier. Now, maybe I can answer that one and give some more detail about that. Of course, I use pdfaPilot here from Callas software. It's not the only tool that can create PDFA files. In the meantime, there are many different solutions that allow you to work with PDFA and that allow you to create pdfa files. There are even test suites that you can use to test these different tools and make sure that they actually give the right result. Because of course that's very difficult. We have an ISO standard. It's a very technical and a very complex standard. You want to be sure that all of these pieces of software that claim to be compatible are actually compatible. And there are a number of industry initiatives like the ISARTR test that can help you to validate whether tools are actually doing the right thing. One more question, does PDFA restrict security for content-based documents? No, it actually does not. There are certainly ways in which you can combine security with a pdfa workflow. Specifically, it is possible to have pdfa files that are digitally signed, for example. However, there is one thing to be careful about. Many of the digital signature features rely on some kind of external validation, and in some cases they rely on timestamping and timestamping information. If you have a PDFA document that is digitally signed, and in order to validate the signature, you have to consult an external certification authority, which is what typically happens, then that can be a problem in an archival workflow, because at that point, you no longer have a self-contained document. You will still be able to open that document and display it, but you won't be able, or you won't necessarily be able to validate whether that signature is still valid. Just think about what can change in 50 years' time and how likely it is that the signature authority that you're using today to validate that digital signature or to create a digital signature today, think about how likely it is that that authority will still be around and will still be working in the same way to validate that digital signature. It might be that the whole system of digital signatures or these certificates that many of these systems are based on today is no longer used, and we've moved to all kinds of biometric means to validate signatures. So if you think about using security together with pdfa, you have to think very clearly or very carefully about how to combine these two. And there are a number of initiatives. I'm not an expert in the field, but there are a number of initiatives, like PDFA is one of them, that give guidelines on how you can combine these two so that you end up with an archive of valid pdfa files that can still be, or the certificate that is stored inside or the digital signature that is stored inside will still be able to be validated 50 years from now as well. So if you're thinking about combining those two, then make sure that you get enough information about it, because it's not trivial. Okay, that's all of the questions that I can see at the moment. In that case, the only thing that rests me is to thank you very much for joining the webinar. If you need more information, like I said, feel free to get in contact either with us or with one of the resellers of callas software in your country. If you want to play with pdfaPilot and experience what the possibilities are, there is a fully functional demo version of pdfaPilot on the Callas software website that you can download. Just go to callassoftware.com, and on the download page you'll find pdfaPilot for Windows and Mac, and that will allow you to test your documents, see whether they are PDFA compliant, whether they can be converted into PDFA. And again, if any questions come up regarding that, don't hesitate and get in contact. We'll be happy to help.